Hey there, scribes. It's Pika Lee, and I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about amateur mistakes that you can absolutely get away with. Melodrama. So, melodrama is a really interesting thing because it sort of becomes a crutch for a lot of people, and that a lot of people meaning even me. So, melodrama is something that you see a lot in very dramatic or very romantic scenarios. It's really exaggerated retelling of something that's happening in a scene, whether it's through dialogue or it's through action. Now, if you're having a lot of melodrama, I'm gonna say that it's actually okay, because melodrama can be toned down eventually, and you need to find where you're comfortable with where that melodrama sits in a story. Now, if you're writing too much melodrama, in the future you want to cut this out, but you've got time if you're new and you're just starting your journey. Now, melodrama can also kind of help you out, because melodrama could be used in a really tension-filled scene. So if there's too much happening in one scene and you go right into a melodramatic moment with a secondary character, it's really nice to cut that tension. And I'm also gonna go ahead and say, in comedy, you can definitely use melodrama. Melodrama really works if you're writing a specific type of comedy, something like satire or something like, I'd say, dry humor. You can get away with having really dry humor and then adding this melodramatic character to really kind of spice it up and punch it up. It's really nice to change the type of humor sometimes when you're writing comedy, because you can be sitting in there a little too long sometimes, and then someone gets tired of that same type of dry joke going on throughout the whole thing. So it's something that you can use to sort of elevate that. You can also use it in romance, because as melodramatic as romance usually is on its own, it's still really fun to have one character, usually a secondary character, because you want to pretty much stay away from it with main characters. But if you've got a secondary character who's putting on that melodrama a little bit hard, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Just make sure you're balancing it. Not worrying about budget. So budget is a really particular thing. It's something that you're going to be thinking about, particularly for anything in screenwriting or television writing or any sort of form of writing that's going to be visual in the future. Now, worrying about budget is something that a lot of people in the future have to worry about, but when you're a new writer, you're generally not going to really write thinking about that. You do sometimes in the future have to consider that when you're writing a script of some sort, because the people who will be picking it up will be very conscious about it. They are the ones shelling out the money for it. And this is why a lot of times something that's done with a few characters in quite a few, only like 3 or 2 locations, is probably a more preferred type of script that people would pick up, because it's easier to make, it's less money, and low risk. Because ultimately, once you actually get into the field of writing, you're going to be pretty much an entrepreneur. You're going to be selling your scripts. You're going to be selling your writing. And so you want to think about the fact that it's going to eventually go into the hands of someone who's going to think about that money. And so that's why I say, as a new writer, you don't really have to worry about writing on budget. You can take your time and write something that's awesome. Something that's like crazy Titanic style, James Cameron, Avatar kind of thing. And not have to worry about, oh, this is going to cost quite a few million to make. Maybe I should tone it back. Maybe I shouldn't write this. Because this is the time you get to explore something that big. And later on, you're gonna have plenty of things that are gonna be more of a scaled back budget for you to write, and you're gonna have plenty of time to write those, and that's gonna be totally fine, because that's the career you chose, and that's kind of how it works for the most part. Now, for novelists, you don't have to really worry about this at all, because you're not ever gonna make it into a movie, although that is technically the goal. But as it's being made into a book, it's already going to be cheaper to make and easier to make. And so, in comparison to films and TV, but it's still going to cost something. But that being said, Novelists don't have to worry about that unless they're really gunning to make this into a film in the future, in which case generally what you really want to focus on anyway is getting that writing out there, having a fan base, and then they'll go ahead and from there, most people will probably pick it up if it's got a pretty good fan base. They can make money off of this. And that's how it works, unfortunately. But as you get further into your career, you're gonna have less control over that, and you're gonna have more of the industry side taking over on what kind of writing you're going to be doing. So it's really important that at this point, you do as much of what you want to do. And that's why I say that you can get away with writing something that's not conscious of a budget at all. Not having a planned theme. So, not having a planned theme is something that I've thought about quite a lot, because having a theme means that you've actually already conceptualized what the moral of the story and what the point of this movie is going to be. And so if you have not planned a theme for your story yet and you've just started writing to feel it out, and you're probably in the panting stage, totally okay, because what's going to happen here is that eventually you're going to open up to the possibilities of what sort of theme you want when you actually start planning things, hopefully in the future. Now, when I was a new writer, I didn't plan anything at all. As a matter of fact, a theme was never something I thought about because I didn't think it was important. And theme generally gets worked out as you're conceptualizing. So for me, a lot of new writers already internally have an actual way of determining what their theme is without knowing its theme. And so I don't worry too much about knowing what your theme is, but sometime in the future you want to get to nail down what it is your characters are really working towards. You know, love conquers all, or money isn't everything, because people will ask you. And this actually becomes something that in the future, anyone who's giving you coverage on your story is going to actually take into consideration. They're going to see if there's a clear theme or themes, because there are generally multiple running through most stories, and they're going to actually take into account, if you are taking into account, what the theme is. You don't want to have a story that just doesn't mean anything. You want to have a story mean something, because that's the point of storytelling for most of us. It's having something that people can identify with, and that's usually through themes. Don't let it get you down if you don't really see a clear theme yet, because revisions are going to start to reveal that theme for you anyways. And so that's totally fine if your revisions start to reveal that theme. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. You're going to do well in the future, so it doesn't matter if you make these small mistakes now. Which brings me to panting a whole script. Okay, let's talk about panting. I know pantsers don't like to hear that you're going to eventually have to outline, but take it from me, you're going to want to outline. Outlining doesn't really suck the fun out of it for me. It actually just concentrates what I'm writing so that I can actually be as productive as possible in getting out as many stories as I can. Now, panting your whole script is totally okay for someone who's new to the field of writing or taking it serious, because the point of panting is to find your style and to, in my opinion, find what you're good at and what you're struggling with. Panting is a really fun exercise for all newbies because it's going to provide so much data for you. And a lot of people don't like to think about writing as data filled, but it really is if you think about it. Because I like to look back and see where I actually had my struggles with and how I've gotten better at them. And that stuff becomes super, super important for me. So those first scripts, those are my pride and joys. They may not be the best, but they are the best for me because I learned how to write off of those. And so what you want to think about when you're panting your script is that the fact that you are writing is the best thing that you could ever do for yourself. And it's really the only thing that can actually improve your writing. So, if you're worried about panting your first script or your second script or your fifth script or your 10th script, do not worry. It's totally fine to do this. You can get away with it. I don't recommend you doing it forever. I recommend you actually start to develop your own sort of plot structure and outlining before you actually start writing. But again, everybody's really different when they write, and this is the time for you to pants your heart out and figure out how to actually create your own way of creating your stories and getting them out there. And if you're not familiar with the term panting, and I've just been saying panting over and over again, it's more of a novel term. When you're writing a novel, they call it panting. It's writing by the seat of your pants, and it's pretty much you just writing without much of an idea of where you're going, or letting your characters pretty much speak to you instead of having an idea of who they are before you start. And that doesn't mean that you don't always have an idea of what your plot is and your character is. It just means that you don't have an outline that you're following. And so that's what panting truly is. And I hope you now spread it across the screenwriting world, because, you know, you'll probably eventually end up writing a novel anyway. Who's kidding? That's totally something that has been done over so many years that I found out about just only recently. And I'm proud of it. I'm proud to be writing any kind of writing that I can, because this is the only thing I really want to be doing. So, sue me. Now on to the last mistake that any amateur can get away with. Writing for yourself. This one might seem kind of strange to say, because, I mean, you're kind of always writing for yourself. But really what I mean is that eventually, once you get further along in your career, you're not truly going to be writing just for yourself. You're going to be writing for a lot of different things. And sometimes that includes thinking about what this script is for, or what this novel is for. Who is it going to be attracting? And sometimes you have to modify that audience. And sometimes you don't have an audience for this piece of writing. And so that piece of writing is going to probably be just a project that you set aside for yourself, and eventually can have made on your own. But just so you know, there's a lot of industry restrictions, and that kind of sometimes does sway what kind of content you're writing. And if something is trending and you're writing it and it's definitely got too many in the field already out, they're probably not going to take it because there's too many like it, and they don't want to flood the market with more because people will get tired of it. And that's why it's really, really critical that when you start writing for yourself, you identify what kind of style you have, who you're going to be writing for, and you start to identify a little bit more about where you want your career to be. You're going to have to, at some point, kind of abide by some sort of industry guidelines, and that's what's going to be the purpose of your agent or manager or whoever you may come across as far as editor, whatever field you're in. And that's why right now, enjoy the process of writing exclusively for yourself. No one is paying you to do this, and that means a whole lot of freedom. A whole lot of freedom to write the craziest, most darkest piece you've ever written. Totally cool for you to do right now, so get started on it and don't look back. Well, that's all I've got for you guys today, and I hope you come back. And if you liked this kind of content, just give me a like and a thumbs up down below, because that tells me that I should make more like this. And if you're enjoying these videos, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the future, scribes.